Well, Thomas, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Shanghai.
No problem.
Thomas, perhaps we can start by understanding a little bit about how we get to, in a sense, a definition of what is a caring brand and what is a daring brand. Where's the source of that coming from?
So as we know, within the BrandZ database, this rich database of information that we have available to us through the great work done by the BrandZ team, is that we look into brands from a characteristic point of view. So we ask consumers how they see the character of this brand. How do they act? How do they perceive this brand? We also ask about attributes about the brand, whether they look after their employees fairly, whether they act in a way that's a leadership way, whether they're shaking things up in the market. So when we take this data that we have at our fingertips, we can compare and contrast across a big list of brands and see where they really stand out in this area. So whether they're seen to be a daring brand, an adventurous brand, a caring brand, as we spoke about, and blend these things together to really find out how brands are perceived and therefore how much permission they have from consumers to act in these certain different ways in the market, which I think are going to become important as we move through the next phases of the pandemic.
So that sort of next phase, in a sense, is a sort of a very interesting phase because consumers, in a sense, would like to get back to new normality. And brands, I think, have a role to play in helping consumers to get there. In some respects, maybe giving consumers permission to be able to get back to a new normality. So in that context, what role does a daring brand versus a caring brand play in this?
I think you hit the nail on the head here, right? I think in this new strange normality that we find ourselves in now in the first few months of this pandemic, and we imagine that it could go on for anywhere up to 12 more months to a year and a half. What we find is that consumers are really saying that brands are playing a key role in the way in which they feel about the market, right? We're seeing brands being given a public platform to act, to give advice, to give permission, to give a sense of solace, a sense of escapism to our consumers in the market. And the permission of these brands means that they really have this way in which that they take this consumer permission and give consumers the ability to go back out to the market. So obviously in the first few months, we had a situation where people were stuck in homes. And I know that across different countries, people are at different stages. But now as we tiptoe out towards a sense of how do we get to, some people call it the new normality, how we want to, find that way back out, brands now have this ability to guide it. Now, if we then look to daring brands, right? So the caring brands are very much about, okay, people are in a time of uncertainty, they don't know what to do, we can give them guidance. You can fast forward perhaps 6 months and progress this pandemic situation a little bit more forward. You can imagine a situation where everyone's kind of got used to this sense of maybe trepidation. They've come to terms with the fear. They're starting to really think about how we live in this brave new reality, whatever we want to call it. And then this is where a more daring brand has the ability to really say, look, let's break out of this mold in a safe way. I'm not saying the brand should be careless or reckless, but it's a way of providing consumers this sense of a little bit of escapism, of adventure in this new normality. So these daring brands, I think in 6 months post, will have this ability to start communicating in much more of a daring way, a much more of an adventurous and exciting way to the consumers.
Now, what about the possibility of sort of molding a caring brand and a daring brand together? Form of joint partnership, joint promotions. Do you think that could be also a very potent force for brands as we move into this next stage?
I think for sure. I think it's a way of perhaps the right terminology is something around the idea of equity piggybacking, as it were. If we imagine that you have in the market today, you have as we know from BrandZ, these huge global brands that have a huge amount of equity, right? And I think, brands like, let's take for example Nike. I think that in some ways it can be both caring and daring at the same time. Now, not every brand has the ability to do that and has the equity and the salience in a market to be able to command that type of duality from consumers. So how does a brand that maybe is seen as very caring act more daring? How does a brand that's maybe more daring seen as more caring? Well, one of the trends that we've seen in China, at least in the past couple of years, but has been accelerated through the impact of COVID, is the idea of co-branding. So whether it's a new product or a communication or some new way of going to the market with another brand, what this has given brands the ability to do is take the equity from a caring brand and a daring brand and put it together and create a new sense of, oh, this brand's actually a little bit different than I thought it was because it's working with that brand. One of the great examples of this we've seen more recently. So in China, we have a chocolate brand called Dove, and you have a soap brand called Dove as well, right? And they actually formed a partnership together where they're just co-communicating through ATL communication of their two products in kind of the same design, theme, and tone. So it's not like a soap flavored chocolate or a chocolate smelling soap, but it's just showing the two brands together in the same space. You could consider that Dove is a bit more about, in terms of the soap, is about caring, antibacterial, hand wash, skin sensitivity, whereas the chocolate is maybe a little bit more indulgent, so a little bit more daring and bringing that element. But when the two of them come together, you really create this synergistic relationship between the brands. And I think what we'll see moving forward is you'll have new classes, new categories of brands working together in a daring and caring way. I mean, there's a lot of different examples in the market that have come out recently. Pepsi joining forces with one of the big Chinese newspapers to talk about heroes, right? Pepsi is quite an adventurous, live life to the max kind of brand, daring, whereas they're communicating with a newspaper, something who provides the news and assurance to consumers and building a platform around heroes and elevating them up in the market. Very interesting way of equity piggybacking and building into new audiences. And I think this will be a huge trend moving forward. And I think brands should be mindful of, if they are a caring brand, which daring brands could I look towards to work with? And if I'm a daring brand, how can I elevate my level of care, not just through something I can do directly, but partnering with someone else who could give me that equity and that perception.
And to understand whether you are a caring brand or a daring brand, what's the best way of being able to do that?
I mean, I think many brands in the market today should have a good sense of where they sit on this spectrum just through their own equity and their own DNA. But luckily, we have the information through BrandZ that allows us to look at where is your unique edge from a consumer point of view. How do they perceive you? And so we've developed a small framework to give you some guidance as to, are you more daring? Are you more caring? What elements of your personality allow you to be more caring? What attributes do you have that allow you to be more caring? And which of those attributes are you maybe falling behind on? And so that gives you a good sense of breaking this down and really understanding, okay, this bit I'm really good at, so I'm going to continue doing that. But there's this element that maybe I'm falling a little bit behind on, so I need to tweak it up a little bit. Maybe I need to change it. And that helps you adjust your own personal brand communications. And then the other way is then, if I'm a very strong caring brand, I want to look towards those daring brands. Who's a brand that, I see on this list who's very daring? Could I partner with them? Could I start a communication, a conversation with them to bring our brands together and build that equity together? We're gonna be bringing together this framework to help people really deep dive into this and understand this. And anyone who's interested in the conversation, we can have that conversation, help you identify where those little elements that you can tweak, those brands that you could collaborate with are there.
Well, I think the concept of caring brands and daring brands is something that's going to be an essential ingredient to really understand in order to optimize both strategy and communications over the course of the next phase. And to find out more about that, please do get in touch with Thomas from Kantar Consulting. But for the moment, Thomas, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, David.